The pilot's steps thudded against the aisle floor, sharper than the hum of the engines. He didn't need to speak right away. The silence that followed his entrance said enough. A silence heavy, waiting. His eyes scanned row after row until they stopped, fixed on Marcus, sitting beside his mother. "Seat," he said, not a request. His voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. Marcus froze, his hand tightening on the armrest. His mother shifted slightly, not out of fear, but out of readiness. She looked up, her expression calm, measured, unyielding. "He's already seated," she replied. Her tone was level, almost gentle, but firm enough to settle the cabin into deeper stillness. The pilot's jaw tightened. "This seat is needed." "Move," whispers began, passengers lowering their voices to threads of sound. Some avoided eye contact altogether. Others peeked, uneasy, unsure if they should speak. None did. Marcus lowered his gaze, the sting of humiliation pressing in. His lips parted, but no words came. His chest rose unevenly, breath caught between fear and defiance. The mother reached over, her hand covering his. She spoke again, slower this time, as though the weight of history lived in her voice. "My son stays." For a moment, the pilot stood there, power draining into the silence. His eyes swept across the cabin, searching for support. No one spoke. Even the flight attendant looked away, busying herself with a tray that didn't need fixing. The boy shifted in his seat, shoulders tense, yet he didn't rise. The cabin itself seemed to hold its breath, watching a single struggle between authority and quiet resistance unfold. The hum of the engines grew louder, swallowing the last of the pilot's command. The headphones rested against Marcus's ear. One side slipped back so he could still hear his mother's voice if she spoke. His pencil moved softly across the page, lines forming a face no one else could see. The pilot's shadow loomed over him, yet Marcus didn't look up. That quietness, that refusal to scramble, seemed louder than any protest. "Take them off," the pilot said flatly. Marcus paused. His hand froze mid-line. The sketch remained unfinished, eyes half-formed, as though waiting for his answer. Slowly, he lowered the pencil, but the headphones stayed. He raised his gaze at last, not sharp, not pleading, just steady. His mother whispered, "Don't," the pilot's lip twitched. "When I give an order, you follow it." "I'm listening," Marcus said softly, adjusting the headphone so it dangled loose. His words weren't sharp, but they cut. The murmur in the cabin quieted further, every passenger holding their breath, afraid to break the fragile line between restraint and eruption. The pilot leaned closer, voice low. "You think sitting there makes you equal? You think ignoring me makes you strong?" Marcus's fingers tightened on the sketchbook. He didn't reply. His silence was answer enough. His mother's hand brushed his wrist, anchoring him. The stillness unnerved the pilot more than resistance could. His voice cracked slightly, louder now, directed not just at Marcus, but at the cabin. "This is my plane." Someone coughed. Another passenger shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke for him. The uniform didn't echo like it once did. Marcus finally shut the sketchbook, headphones slipping back fully over his ear. A small act, nothing grand, yet in that moment, he took the air the pilot tried to control, and kept it. "You don't belong here. Move." The words struck harder than volume could. The pilot didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice carried weight born from uniforms and history, from knowing silence usually worked in his favor. Marcus's mother stiffened. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The boy didn't flinch. He leaned back, headphones still hugging his ear, sketchbook resting closed on his lap. A pause stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Passengers shuffled, eyes pinned to magazines, tray tables, anything but the boy. Marcus spoke, low, steady. I already have a seat. The pilot's jaw clenched. Not anymore, stand up. His mother whispered, Please, let it go. Her voice cracked in the small space, half prayer, half warning. She touched Marcus's sleeve, but her hand trembled. Marcus turned his head toward her, almost smiling. I'm not making trouble. His calmness carried more defiance than shouting. Ever could. The pilot's authority wavered. He searched the cabin for support, but found only bowed heads, the hush of people pretending not to hear. One man coughed, then stilled. You're testing me, the pilot muttered, louder now. I won't allow disrespect. Marcus lifted, his sketchbook slightly. Drawing isn't disrespect. The silence thickened. The boy's voice was soft, but it echoed louder than the man's uniform. A stewardess appeared down the aisle, uncertain, eyes flicking between them. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The shift was already happening. The pilot's hand tightened on the seat in front of Marcus, knuckles pale. For the first time, his certainty cracked. Marcus slid the headphone fully back on, the gesture slow, deliberate. He didn't move, didn't argue. His presence was the reply. The pilot's breath hitched. The command hung unanswered in the stale cabin air. Marcus's words didn't echo, but they shook something loose in the room. His voice was firm, not sharp. The kind of voice that forces people to listen because it doesn't ask for power. It already owns it. The pilot blinked, the silence pressing against him harder than the boy's sentence. For the first time, his shoulders dropped an inch. He tried to recover. You're just a kid. You don't... I know where I belong, Marcus said. Not loud, not rushed. Each syllable carried weight, the kind of weight no uniform could erase. His mother's hand stayed on his sleeve, weak now, her lips trembling between fear and pride. She didn't speak. She couldn't. A passenger 2 rows back shifted, finally daring to look up. The stewardess still lingered in the aisle, torn between protocol and conscience. Her mouth opened, then shut, her throat working against words she couldn't risk. The pilot's voice cracked slightly. You think you can defy me in front of everyone? Marcus's eyes didn't blink. I'm not defying. I'm sitting. That single word, sitting, burned through the stale air like a match. No theatrics, just truth. The man's authority faltered. He wanted anger, wanted the boy to shout, to give him something he could punish. Instead, Marcus gave him nothing. Calmness became his shield, and the cracks in the pilot's posture widened. Someone coughed again. Someone else finally looked up from their magazine. The room wasn't siding with Marcus out loud, but it was shifting, leaning in his direction. Through silence, the boy didn't move. He didn't need to. His steadiness had already spoken. The pilot inhaled sharply, but the sound betrayed him, more fear than control. And the cabin, once locked in obedience, was listening differently now. The cough lingers in the air longer than it should have. The man doesn't look up, just presses his palm harder against his mouth. The woman in 12C slides the folded newspaper into her bag with trembling fingers. No one says Marcus is wrong. No one says he is right. They just look away. His mother's eyes scan the aisle, searching for anyone to stand beside them. Nothing. Only lowered heads and restless hands. She whispers, They see you, Marcus. They just don't want to. Marcus swallows, his voice steady, though. Quieter now. They don't have to speak. Silence is enough. The pilot stiffens at that. He turns sharply toward the rows, his gaze daring someone, anyone, to challenge him. But the passengers shrink deeper into their seats, trading courage for safety. He feels their eyes brushing him, then vanishing, and that absence stings worse than open defiance. The stewardess shifts again. Her lips part, a breath caught, but her voice refuses to form. She lowers her eyes like the rest. Marcus whispers to himself, though the words crawl out loud enough. Fear keeps them chained. His mother hears it. Her hand tightens on his wrist. Don't let it chain you too. The boy doesn't answer. He just sits straighter. His silence now feels heavier than all the others combined. The man with the cough fidgets with his seatbelt. The woman in 12C wipes invisible dust from her skirt. Their shame is thick, visible, yet they bury it under small movements. Every gesture screams, "Not my fight," and in that suffocating quiet, the truth becomes unbearable. This system breathes, not only through men like the pilot, but through those who bow their heads and let cruelty pass unchallenged. The pilot's shadow leans closer, but Marcus does not flinch. His hand stays pressed against the worn sketchbook, pages bent, corners bruised. The only sound is the faint scratch of his thumbnail dragging along the cardboard cover. His mother whispers, "Marcus?" "Don't," though her voice shakes more from fear than from warning. Marcus finally speaks, low and firm. "I'm not moving." The pilot narrows his eyes. "You think that notebook will protect you?" Marcus shakes his head. "It already does." The words hang, heavier than fists. He doesn't explain, and he doesn't need to. The drawings beneath his palm speak in silence. Faces, hands, places that give him strength. His grip tightens, each second a statement. "I am still here." The stewardess glances again, her lips parted. She almost steps forward, then freezes as the pilot turns slightly. Passengers continue their performance of ignorance, newspapers, coughing, shifting. Yet some glance at the boy's hand, at the trembling pages, as though something about that stillness unsettles them more than defiance ever could. The pilot leans closer, lowering his voice. "You're testing me, son." Marcus looks at him, steady, unblinking. "No. You're showing them yourself." A ripple of unease spreads across the row. The woman in 12C bites her lip hard. The coughing man clears his throat but cannot look away now. Silence has turned into complicity they can no longer ignore. Marcus's mother whispers again, softer, "Please." But even she realizes his stillness is not recklessness. It is survival sharpened into something sharper than words. The pilot straightens, his jaw tight. For the first time, he doesn't answer. Marcus's knuckles stay white around the sketchbook, proof that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the refusal to rise when everything demands you do. The pilot's shadow stretches over Marcus, but the boy doesn't flinch. His fingers remain tight around the sketchbook, the paper slightly crumpled under his grip. Silence lingers like smoke in the air, heavier than any shouted command. The uniformed man clears his throat, voice low but edged with authority. "Son, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Marcus lifts his eyes slowly. "I'm not moving." His voice isn't loud, but it carries weight. A few passengers turn their heads. Some whisper, others pretend not to hear. But the tension wraps the cabin tight, the pilot's jaw tightens. "This isn't about you. It's about rules." Marcus answers after a pause, measured, steady. "Seems the rules change depending on who's sitting here." The words land sharper than expected. The pilot shifts his stance, one hand brushing his cap as if seeking control through the gesture. He leans closer, lowering his tone. "Do you know who I am?" Marcus doesn't blink. "Do you?" The quiet question hangs, cutting deeper than defiance ever could. Narration slips in. The boy's restraint is louder than protest. Each second he holds still, the balance tilts. The pilot, wrapped in symbols of power, begins to feel smaller. With every unshaken stare, passengers sense it too. A woman coughs into her hand, eyes fixed on Marcus. A man shakes his head slowly. The silence isn't empty. It's siding with the one who hasn't raised his voice. The pilot exhales sharply, looking for ground he no longer holds. Marcus doesn't smirk, doesn't move, doesn't break. His stillness becomes a statement, his composure the only resistance needed. The space between them shifts. Authority trembles. Dignity holds. The cabin feels pinned under the weight of silence. Every breath is shallow, every movement too loud. The pilot's stare drills into Marcus, but the boy doesn't shift. Then, like a thread being pulled, a voice from the back cuts through. Do you know who his mother is? The question isn't shouted. It's soft, almost casual, but it drops heavy. Heads turn. The pilot blinks, caught off guard. He straightens, trying to hide the sudden crack in his composure. Marcus lowers his gaze for the first time, not out of shame, but restraint. Narration creeps in. The boy carried his silence as a shield, but the truth waiting behind it was sharper than anything he could say. The pilot's voice falters. And who would that be? Another passenger leans forward, words steady. The engineer who rebuilt this airline after your company nearly collapsed. The one who wrote the safety system you stand on right now. A ripple runs through the cabin. The uniforms, the rank, the authority, suddenly thinner, almost fragile. Marcus doesn't speak. He lets the silence do the work. His mother's presence, though unseen, fills the space. The pilot's hand grips the seat back tightly. His throat tightens around words that no longer sound strong. That doesn't matter, he mutters, but even he knows it does. Narration settles quietly. In that pause, everything shifted. The rules bent. The seat was no longer just leather and steel. It was history, blood, sacrifice. The cabin waits. Marcus lifts his eyes again, steady as stone. He doesn't need to argue. The truth has already spoken louder than he ever could. The cliffhanger rests there, an unspoken promise that the balance of power has changed. The silence in the cabin lingers, but Marcus feels it shift inside him. His gaze drifts away from the pilot, away from the murmurs of strangers, and lands somewhere deep in memory. The hum of the plane fades into the sound of a bell over a shop door. Sorry, kid. We're closed. The words echo, flat and cold. Marcus had stood at that counter with $1 in his palm, sneakers worn down from schoolyard dust. Behind him, 2 boys, lighter skin, brighter shoes, were waved in with a smile. But you just let them. His voice had cracked, too soft to carry weight. The clerk's eyes hadn't met his. Come back tomorrow. Narration weaves in, low and steady. It was never about the candy he couldn't buy. It was about the wall built in plain sight, the reminder that some doors stayed shut no matter how long you waited. In the cabin, Marcus blinks hard, jaw tightening. He hears the clerk's voice again, sharper now with age, burned into his memory. He remembers the way the $1 felt heavier as he shoved it back into his pocket. The boy he was had walked home in silence, past houses where porch lights glowed, past laughter spilling onto streets he never belonged to. Back in the present, a hand touches his arm lightly, a fellow passenger. You all right? Marcus doesn't answer. His silence is layered. The silence of a boy turned away. The silence of a man now holding steady in a cabin where truth has begun to bend power. The narration closes softly. He had learned long ago that wounds don't always bleed. Some sit quietly, shaping the way a man breathes when the world finally looks at him. The hum of the plane steadies, but Marcus feels himself pulled again into another corner of his past. He hears chalk against a board, the scrape of chairs, the muffled laughter of classmates. His hand had shot up quick that day, eager, certain of the answer. Anyone? The teacher asked, eyes drifting across the room. Marcus's arm stayed high. He leaned forward, waiting. But the teacher's gaze slid past him, landing on a boy 2 rows over. Yes, go ahead. Marcus's lips parted, the answer caught in his throat. He raised his hand higher, his shoulder aching now. When silence filled the room again, he whispered, "I know it. I can say it." The teacher's eyes flicked to him, sharp and impatient. "Don't be disruptive, Marcus." The room had stilled. His hand fell, slow and heavy. A few kids smirked. Some looked away, pretending not to see. Narration carries the memory like a scar. That day, he learned a louder silence, one where his thoughts stayed locked inside, not because he didn't know, but because someone had decided he wasn't worth hearing. On the plane, Marcus presses his lips tight. The memory presses back harder than the seatbelt against his chest. He hears the echo of his own young voice. "I know it. I can say it." And then the teacher's cutting reply, over and over, louder than chalk, louder than the classroom clock. A passenger coughs nearby, pulling him back. But the old weight stays. It's not the words that remain. It's the way the class had carried on, as if he was never there. Marcus stares ahead, eyes glassy but steady. Silence once crushed him. Now it steals him. The drone of the engine softens and Marcus's mind wanders again. This time, it isn't chalk or raised hands. It's the stale hum of office lights, the shuffle of papers, the silence after doors closed behind people who never came back. He remembers the first one. A man named Terrence, always neat, always early. They called him disruptive when he asked why inspections weren't done right. One morning, security walked him out. No one said a word. Marcus had whispered, he was right. A woman beside him muttered, "Keep it down." Her eyes never left her screen. Weeks later, another empty desk, then another. "Why's everyone leaving?" Marcus had asked softly. A manager's flat reply, "They didn't fit the culture." The words still sting. Didn't fit the culture. The phrase hung heavy, like a code everyone understood but no one named out loud. Narration threads his memory. Those chairs didn't just stay empty. They accused. Every swivel seat left behind was a reminder of voices shut down, of people who dared to point at cracks in the walls and were punished for it. One night, Marcus lingered by those empty desks, brushing his hand across cold keyboards. He wanted to believe the silence was temporary, that someone would return, but the rows stood hollow, untouched, like graves without names. The worst part wasn't the removals. It was the way the office swallowed the losses, business resuming, as if no one had ever filled those spaces. Back on the plane, Marcus shifts in his seat. His chest tightens with the same old weight. The quiet is not peace. It's absence. And in those absences, he sees himself, still seated, still waiting, wondering when silence might come for him too. "Do you remember that letter?" Marcus's voice is low, almost swallowed by the hum around him. Angela nods without meeting his eyes. "The one from David." Yes. His jaw tightens. He wrote it after they fired Terrence. Spent nights on it. Every word. Careful. Steady. He thought if he laid it out plain enough, someone upstairs would finally listen. Angela exhales. "They didn't." Marcus studies her face, waiting. Silence stretches. She whispers, "I was there. I saw it." He frowns. She swallows hard. The manager tore it in half, right there at his desk, said, "We don't need this kind of trouble." Then he dropped it in the bin like it was nothing. Marcus closes his eyes. Narration fills the pause. That sound still lives in him. The quiet rip of paper, a man's plea shredded before it touched the air. A truth erased without even being heard. He speaks again, voice brittle. He believed that letter would change something. He trusted it more than he trusted his own voice. Angela's eyes water. "I should have stopped it." "You couldn't." His tone sharpens, then falls flat. "That's the thing. None of us could." The weight of unspoken guilt presses between them. Both know the truth. The letter might have been the spark, But sparks don't matter if the fire is smothered before it breathes. Angela wipes her cheek. It never even left the room. Marcus nods slowly. The memory cuts deeper than firings, deeper than whispers. Because this was proof, written and undeniable, yet it was destroyed. Not because it was wrong, but because it was right. He whispers to himself more than to her. That's how they keep us quiet. The words hang, unchallenged. ChatGPT said the AI. Reporter's voice barely carried over the intercom. They've done this before. Marcus froze. His hands, still gripping the handle of his worn suitcase, tightened. He turned slowly. What did you say? The reporter's eyes darted around, checking who might be listening. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Your friend's letter? The one that disappeared? It isn't the first. Others tried. Same words. Same silence. Angela stepped forward, her tone sharp but trembling. You're telling me there were more? And no one knows? The reporter hesitated, then shook her head. They know. That's the problem. Management kept every complaint buried, shredded, buried under meetings and fake smiles. Each time the workers thought it was just them, alone. But it wasn't. Marcus's throat tightened. Narration crept in. It was one thing to be silenced once. It was another to realize it was part of a machine, designed to erase every voice. Before it reached daylight, he whispered, almost to himself. So the hallway's full of ghosts. Angela's jaw trembled. Why are you telling us this now? The reporter's eyes softened, a crack in her professional mask. Because it's happening again. And this time, I think they've gone too far. A silence spread, broken only, by the rolling wheels of luggage and the low hum of the terminal. Marcus leaned back against the cold wall, closing his eyes. The truth pressed heavier than anger, heavier than grief. It wasn't just Terrence or David or the letter. It was everyone who had ever tried to speak and been erased before the ink dried. Angela's voice shook but steadied. Then it's not just our fight anymore. The reporter gave a short nod. No words followed. None were needed. His voice came, quietly, breaking the silence left by the reporter's nod. I told them. Nothing changed. Marcus turned, startled. The man was maybe in his late 20s, but his tone carried the weight of a boy still trapped in yesterday. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the strap of his bag. Angela studied him. You went through it too? He gave a dry laugh, though nothing about it was light. I was 16, flying home from school. My father saved for months to buy me a first-class ticket. Said I deserved to feel respected just once. They came to me halfway through boarding. Didn't ask, didn't explain. Just told me to get up and move to the back. I still remember how people stared, waiting to see if I'd argue. Marcus's jaw tightened. Narration pressed in. Some wounds don't close. They sit, raw, replaying themselves with each breath. Each retelling, the man's voice cracked. I wrote letters every year, to the airline, to the papers, to anyone who'd listen. You know what I got? He paused, staring at the ground. Nothing. Like it never happened. Like I never happened. Angela whispered almost too softly. And you never forgot. He shook his head. No, you don't forget being told your place. You don't forget the look on the steward's face, like moving me wasn't cruel, just routine. Marcus exhaled slowly. They've been writing the same script for years. Different faces, same ending. The man lifted his eyes at last, steady but scarred. Not if you change it. Silence followed, heavy, unbroken, the kind that forced everyone near to feel the weight of a memory that refused to grow old. The man's words lingered in the air, but Angela's phone buzzed. She glanced down, hesitant, then answered. A clipped voice echoed faintly through the speaker. "We've already resolved this matter. Nothing further needs attention." Marcus frowned. "Resolved? With what? Silence and signatures?" The man who had spoken before looked away, his shoulders stiff. Narration pressed in. Justice had been signed away in rooms they were never invited into. Deals written in ink heavier than the truth. Angela's jaw clenched. "So that's it? You bury it and we live with it?" The voice on the phone hesitated. "The company acted in the best interest of all parties. Settlements were reached." "Settlements," Marcus repeated bitterly. "That's what you call shutting people up." The silence after his words was long, awkward, suffocating. Somewhere, on the other end, a sigh slipped out. "You don't understand the pressure," the voice said, quieter now. "Lawsuits would have destroyed careers. Headlines would have—" "Headlines?" Angela cut in, sharp. "You were afraid of headlines, while he was 16, humiliated in front of strangers. You buried a boy's pain so your stock wouldn't fall." The man who remembered the flight finally turned back, his face pale but steady. "They paid me to be quiet. Thought I'd spend it and forget. I kept the check, framed it, proof of what they tried to buy." The voice faltered. "You kept it?" He nodded once. "Uncashed. My father said silence bought with money is still silence, but he was wrong. It's evidence." Marcus leaned forward, voice low. "And now it's coming out." The line went dead. No explanation. Just the click of someone too afraid to stay. Narration filled the quiet. Secrets rot faster when hidden. And every door closed too tightly only swells the noise outside. ChatGPT said, the glass rattled faintly as the door closed, the room holding its breath with her in it. Evelyn Carter stood still, her voice low but steady. "They called me ambitious," she said, not to the man across from her, but to the years that lingered between them. What they meant was, I didn't know my place. The executive shifted, in his chair, looking anywhere but her eyes. "You remember?" she continued. "Those blueprints. My name stripped off, your signatures plastered on. You built your careers on theft." Silence filled the room like smoke. He tried weakly. "We gave you opportunities." She cut him with a glance. "You gave me silence. You gave me a corner office without a voice, and when I wouldn't bow, you buried me. So I built elsewhere, brick by brick, runway by runway." Her hands rested on the table, fingers still, like steel forged from fire. The executive finally whispered, "You won, Evelyn. Isn't that enough?" Her eyes hardened, though her voice never rose. "My son sat on the floor of a plane, while you sat here counting bonuses. Winning is survival, but dignity, that's something you can't buy back." Narration rose quietly, pulling weight from her stillness. She had not built airports for revenge. She built them because the world left her no choice. Concrete had become her language, steel her weapon, and every plane that took off from her runways carried her defiance. The man's face cracked under her calm. His lips parted, but no words came. The silence told her everything. She leaned back, almost gentle. "I don't need your apology. The ground you walk on already says my name." The room fell quiet, and in that quiet, he finally understood he had lost. The clip begins mid-sentence, the pilot's voice sharp, commanding. "Seat's not for him. Move." The phone shakes as passengers look away, eyes fixed on screens, magazines, anything but the boy standing still. His voice is steady, almost too quiet. "No, I'm fine here." A pause follows, long, heavy, the kind that drags shame out of everyone listening. On the video, no one intervenes. No one tells the pilot to stop. The silence of the cabin becomes its own testimony. Later, in the boardroom, Evelyn plays the footage on a screen. The same executive stares down, his jaw clenched. The boy's refusal echoes through the speakers again. "That sound," Evelyn says softly, pointing to the hush after her son's words. "That's the sound of people agreeing without speaking, the sound of complicity." The executive shifts, mutters, "It's just a video. People exaggerate online." Her gaze doesn't waver. "No, it's truth. Truth doesn't vanish anymore. You can shred papers, bury files, silence engineers, but a phone in one stranger's hand exposes everything you built your career protecting." Narration cuts in, like a shadow over the room. The video traveled faster than lies. It played in living rooms, classrooms, offices. It replayed in silence over dinner tables where people tried to explain to their children why no one helped the boy who refused to stand. The executive finally speaks, his voice low, fragile. "We can manage the press?" Evelyn almost smiles, not with joy, but with finality. "You can't erase millions of eyes. You can't unhear his no." The screen freezes on her son's face, calm, unshaken. And in that still frame, the power shifts again, permanently. The key. Room falls into silence, and no one dares to move. She kept her head down at the grocery store, but the whispers followed. Two women by the fruit stand leaned in close, one muttering, "It's real. My cousin was on that flight." The other lowered her eyes. "I saw it too." The boy didn't flinch. Their voices carried just enough for Evelyn to hear, though. She pretended not to. Narration presses in like a soft drumbeat. At first it was only fragments, murmurs in locker rooms, cautious mentions in classrooms, people testing the safety of saying aloud what they already knew. The video was not a trick, not a rumor. It was truth. In the break room at the plant, a worker slammed his coffee down. "Man, we can't keep acting like it ain't happening. I watched it. He stood his ground, and that man used his uniform to crush him." Silence answered. Heavy, but no one told him to stop. Online, the same words appeared again and again. Why didn't anyone help? Why was his calm called defiance? At a neighborhood meeting, a young mother spoke, her voice shaky but firm. "If it were my son, I'd want someone to say something. Not later. Not online. Right there." Her words hung in the air until an older man, usually quiet, muttered, "We've all been too quiet for too long." Narration weaves through their hesitation. The whispers grew heavier, gathering weight, until silence itself began to sound like guilt. One by one, voices cracked open, small and ordinary, but together building into something that could no longer be ignored. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, hearing it ripple through her own block now. Whispers at first, then voices, then a chorus, aimed not just at her son's pain, but at the system that allowed it. This time, the noise would not fade. ChatGPT said, the locker room had changed. Last month, men clapped him on the back, laughing too loudly at his jokes. Now their voices dimmed when he stepped in. A half-zipped bag suddenly needed adjusting. Shoes needed lacing. Not one pair of eyes lifted. "Morning," he said, low but sharp. No reply. Only the hiss of water from a distant shower. Narration crept between their silence. Power does not collapse in fire. It slips away in quiet refusals. In the space, where a laugh should be, in the way no one looks up when you expect them to. At the coffee machine, he tried again. "You all seen that storm online? People don't know the half of it." His voice reached for control, but his words fell flat. A younger officer poured sugar into his cup without a glance. "Don't know what you mean," he muttered, then walked off. The pilot swallowed hard. "They used to defend me before I opened my mouth. Now even my excuses sound like noise." Later in the corridor, he caught the chief mechanic's eye. "You know me. You know I didn't—" The man raised a hand. "I don't want to hear it." Just that. Not anger, not loyalty, only withdrawal. He felt the walls shift around him. For years he had been untouchable, uniform polished, words heavy. But now each step echoed too loud. Every door he opened revealed faces that turned away. Narration thickened like smoke. Respect cannot be demanded once it has been surrendered. He had not lost his job, not yet. But he had lost something harder to regain, the illusion that people still stood behind him. Alone, he sat in his office. No whispers this time, just silence, heavier than any chorus. The wheels screeched against the runway, but no cheer, no sigh of relief followed. Inside the cabin, heads tilted toward the windows where flashing lights swarmed. A crew member whispered, "They're waiting." Her eyes refused to meet his. The pilot loosened his grip on the armrest. "It's just noise," he muttered, though his voice cracked halfway. Nobody answered. The silence of the crew had become heavier than any protest chant outside. Narration threaded itself through the quiet. The landing was smooth, but the ground beneath him was no longer safe. Every hidden remark, every abuse of authority had taken flight without his permission, and now it waited on the tarmac. Reporters pressed forward, cameras raised. Protesters held signs that bled with short, sharp words. "We saw. We know. Not forgotten." He stood at the doorway, frozen. Once, a crowd had been his audience. Now they were his jury. "Captain," a young attendant said carefully, "they want answers." His reply came slow, almost pleading. "If I don't speak, maybe it passes." But the attendant shook her head. "No, sir. It's already louder than you." She stepped aside, leaving space between them. That space felt like a verdict. The engines cooled, but tension thickened. Reporters shouted questions he could no longer control. Protesters pounded at barriers. Each voice outside tore at the walls he thought silence would protect. Narration closed in. For years, silence had been his shield, his weapon, his comfort. But silence cannot hold against truth once it finds its way into the open. The plane had landed, yet the ground refused to steady beneath him. He stepped forward into the noise. His lips parted, but no words came. The cameras caught everything. The gavel struck once, sharp enough to still the murmurs. The air thickened. The judge's robe swept across the bench as he settled in, face stern but unreadable. Cameras clicked, but then the silence pressed harder, as if the room itself demanded restraint. The pilot leaned back, a faint smirk clinging to his lips. "Same theater, different day," he whispered toward his lawyer. The words barely carried, but the passengers in the front row stiffened. One woman, hands clenched around her bag, kept her eyes locked on him. Narration lingered softly. He had learned to hide behind walls built of silence and law. But in this room, silence grew louder than his smirk. The prosecutor rose. For years, complaints vanished, memos buried, voices ignored, but today those voices sit here, watching. His tone stayed calm, but the weight of his words made the pilot's smile falter for a breath. The defense tapped a pen, steady, rehearsed. "My client followed protocol, nothing more." A man from the back stood without permission. His voice cracked, but it cut the silence like glass. "Protocol nearly killed us. Don't dress cruelty as procedure." Gasps rippled, but no one moved to silence him. Even the judge hesitated before gesturing gently for order. The pilot shifted in his seat, his smirk slipping into a nervous swallow. His lawyer leaned in. "Don't react. They'll burn out." But they didn't. The quiet that followed was heavier than shouting. Victims' eyes stayed on him, steady, unflinching. The smirk could not survive their silence. Narration closed. The moment. In that room, silence no longer protected him. It stripped him bare, leaving only the weight of what he had done. And every eye refused to look away. The judge's voice lingered in the air. "State your defense." The pilot rose, tugging once at his cuffs, his boots clicking against the floor as though the sound itself carried authority. He straightened, chin high. "It was standard procedure," he said, his tone clipped, rehearsed. Then he added with quiet certainty, "He didn't belong there." A hush cut through the room. The words did not land as defense. They sank as confession. Narration. Curled between the silence. For him, the boy had been a seat number, an inconvenience. For those listening, the words scraped open wounds that had never closed. The prosecutor didn't move, just let the stillness grow. Then, "Didn't belong where? On the plane? Or in your world?" His voice was even, but each syllable pressed. Harder than shouting. The pilot's jaw flexed. "I followed the manual. I enforced order." A mother in the gallery whispered hoarsely, "You enforced fear." The sound carried, thin but piercing. The judge did not silence her. The defense lawyer tried to cut in. "Your Honor, irrelevant interruptions." But the judge raised a hand. "Let him answer." The pilot's smirk threatened to return, but faltered at the edges. "People don't understand what it takes to keep control. If I don't act, chaos spreads. I did my duty." The prosecutor leaned closer. "And a boy paid the price for your duty." The pilot shifted, eyes darting briefly toward the cameras. Sweat rose at his temple, though his voice still clung to arrogance. "You weren't there." Narration seeped into the pause. He wanted control. He wanted the room to bend. But every word pulled tighter around him until authority felt less like armor and more like a noose. The silence afterward weighed heavier than any verdict. The air tightened after the pilot's last words. Then, the scrape of a chair. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood, her back straight, her palms steady against the wooden table. She didn't need volume. Her presence alone demanded the room. Her voice cut through like a blade drawn slow. "He belonged. More than anyone." The gallery gasped, some leaning forward, others clutching their own silence. She did not flinch. "He belongs," she continued, eyes fixed on the pilot. "Because I built the place you profit from, brick by brick, years of service, sweat you'll never touch." The pilot's jaw tensed, but he looked away, searching for the ground he had lost. His smirk faltered into something thinner, weaker. Narration whispered between her words. She carried no badge, no uniform. Her authority came from truth, layered over years of being dismissed, stepped on, yet never erased. The defense lawyer muttered, "Irrelevant testimony," but the judge's hand lifted again. "Let her speak." Evelyn's tone stayed calm, steady. "You threw him out like he was disposable. But my son carries the weight of my work, my sacrifice. His right to sit on that plane was bought long before you touched the controls." The silence stretched. Then softly, "Say he didn't belong again. Look at me when you say it." The pilot tried. His lips parted, but the words snagged. His arrogance had been armor. Now it clattered at his feet, piece by piece. Narration lingered. Her strike wasn't in shouting him down, but in holding his gaze without trembling. The room shifted. Even the air betrayed him, bending toward her calm. She sat back, no applause, no smile. Just silence, heavier than any verdict yet spoken. The room no longer belonged to him. His shoulders, once squared with certainty, bent under the weight of her words. The pilot's fingers twitched against the table, struggling to appear still. His lips pressed into a hard line, but the cracks spread faster than he could hide. The audience felt it before he did, authority draining out like air from a punctured lung. Marcus sat unmoving. His posture carried no fire, no demand, only the steady calm of someone who had nothing left to prove. He didn't look at the pilot. He didn't need to. His silence was the loudest voice in the room. Narration cut in. For years, his smirk had been enough. His uniform, his wings, his skin, each had served as armor. But no shield survives when truth lands this heavy. Marcus's mother didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Her stillness pressed harder than confrontation ever could. "Answer, Captain," the judge said. The pilot opened his mouth, but the sound barely escaped. "I was wrong." The syllables clung to his tongue, foreign, unwanted. Gasps rose, not from the confession, but from the collapse itself. Watching a man built on arrogance sink into something smaller, human, broken. Marcus blinked once, slow. His dignity stood untouched. The narration sealed it. For the first time, the man who ruled the skies could no longer breathe. The gavel did not strike. Silence itself delivered the verdict. The screen's glow painted his face pale, each headline slicing deeper than the last. "Former pilot under fire." Voices of silence speak louder. "Grounded for good." He scrolled slower, as if dragging time might change the words. The phone never buzzed. No calls, no messages, just the faint hum of nothing. He whispered, almost to himself, "They were my crew, my friends." The words vanished into the stale air. The sound of a car outside made him glance toward the blinds. He froze when footsteps passed his window, quick, avoiding, as if even their shadows didn't want to linger near his walls. He tapped open his contacts. Names lined up like ghosts. He pressed one, hesitated, then closed it. He tried another, only to see the gray block of a number disconnected. His chest rose heavy, then fell. Narration slipped in. The man who once soared above clouds now drowns in silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence that comes when the world turns its back. His thumb hovered over Marcus's name. His jaw tightened. He set the phone down, almost gentle, as if it carried weight too sharp to hold. A knock rattled the door, sudden, sharp. He stiffened. For a second, hope flickered. Someone had come. But the sound faded quickly. Footsteps, retreating without waiting for an answer. Whoever it was didn't want to be seen near him. He leaned back, whispering again, but softer this time. "I never thought it'd end like this." The phone dimmed, screen fading to black, reflecting only his tired eyes. Narration sealed the moment. The man who once soared now scrolled in silence. And in that silence, the walls pressed closer than the skies ever had. The words still rang in his head. "They won't hire you again." Cold, sharp, final. He hadn't argued then. He couldn't. Even now, sitting across the dim room, he mouthed them silently, as if testing whether they'd change their meaning if spoken by him. They didn't. The closet door stood ajar. His uniform hung inside, sleeves limp, cap resting on the shelf above. He stared at it for a long time before whispering, "It used to mean something." From the other side of the room, Marcus's voice cracked the quiet. He had come by, hesitant, eyes lowered. "It did. But now, it scares people more than it comforts them." The pilot's jaw clenched. "So that's it? After 20 years? It just ends with whispers and headlines?" Marcus shifted, hands in his pockets. "It ended the day no one wanted to stand next to you. That's the truth." Narration slipped. In. Power didn't vanish when they dragged his name across screens. It vanished when silence grew heavier than loyalty. He pressed his palm against the closet door, then let it swing shut. The click was softer than expected, yet it echoed through the room like a gavel. "I gave them everything," he muttered. "Every landing, every storm, every damn mile." His voice cracked but never rose. Marcus took a step closer, then stopped. "Doesn't matter what you gave. They've already decided." The pilot looked down, shoulders folding inward. For the first time, the weight wasn't from the skies above, but from the ground beneath, pressing harder, unforgiving. Narration lingered. The uniform didn't come off in one violent tear. It was taken slowly, piece by piece, until nothing remained but silence and a closed door. The echo of the closet door still lingered when the scene shifted. Dr. Carter walked slowly through the airport she had fought decades to bring alive. Her. Heels clicked against the polished floor, steady, deliberate. Heads turned, not from fear, not from scandal, but respect. She did not need to announce who she was. The walls carried her name, though none were carved. A young employee straightened, his vest when he saw her. "Good morning, Dr. Carter." His voice held reverence. She offered a quiet nod. Nothing more. That was enough. Narration threaded the silence. Every brick carried her fingerprints. Every gate bore the memory of nights she fought meetings that never wanted her at the table. She had been told she did not belong, yet the proof of her belonging stretched across runways too wide to erase. Near the ticket counter, two women whispered. One leaned close. "That's her. She built this place." The words weren't gossip. They were acknowledgement. She paused at a window overlooking the tarmac. Planes rose, cutting through the sky she once feared her son would never touch with. Dignity. Her eyes softened. "He deserves to walk free here," she whispered under her breath. A supervisor approached cautiously, papers in hand. "Dr. Carter, it's an honor. We wouldn't have these jobs without you." Her gaze held his, calm but piercing. "Then make sure no one forgets who built it. And why." He nodded quickly, throat tight. Narration followed her steps. She didn't gloat. She reclaimed. This was not victory shouted into microphones. It was quiet justice, stitched into floors and ceilings, a reminder that her son's dignity could never again be folded away like a uniform in a closet. Marcus sat by the window, knees drawn up, a pad of paper balanced against his thigh. The pencil scratched quietly, each line carrying weight. His voice was soft, almost lost in the hum of the terminal. "You didn't have to fight for me, Mama." Dr. Carter turned from the glass, the sunset reflecting against her face. She didn't rush to answer. The pause hung heavy, like the years she had swallowed in silence. "I always will," she said finally. Her voice didn't tremble, but it carried scars. Marcus kept his eyes on the page, shading the wing of a plane. "They tried to break me. Every day I walked into that school, I thought maybe I'd disappear." His hand stilled. "But you didn't let me." Her breath caught, though she kept her composure. Narration filled the quiet. This was her victory. Not the buildings, not the titles, but the boy who refused to vanish even when the world shoved him into corners too small to breathe. Marcus set down the pencil, staring at his mother. "Doesn't it tire you? Always fighting? Always proving?" She lowered herself beside him, folding her hands. "Yes," she admitted. A single word, steady, naked. But tired doesn't mean done. Silence pressed in. The distant roar of a departing jet filled the space between them. Marcus leaned his head against her shoulder, eyes fixed on the streak of orange sky. Narration. The boy they tried to erase now walked across runways his mother had built. No one could deny the ground beneath him. No one could silence the echo of her footsteps leading him here. Her hand rested lightly on his back. Neither spoke again. The quiet said enough.